have a few questions for you to start. How many of you have learned about tokenization in the last 2 days here at Singapore? Heard of tokenization? Come on, everybody should raise their hands because that was the topic of the entire conference. So we are all tired about tokenization, right? We're all tired about hearing about it. What I'm going to try to do is give you a sense for how big tokenization is going to be, why do you need to pay attention to it, and how do you start? I'm guessing many of you are founders, startups, technologists, and you need to find a way to build your next product onto a tokenization platform because that market is huge. So that market is huge because McKinsey is actually saying in 2030, $2 trillion worth of assets are going to be tokenized. And I don't know about you, but when I hear $2 trillion, it's a big number, but it's a market cap of the large technology companies, right? It's market cap of Apple and Google and others. So it's not that big, right? I'm actually thinking that McKinsey is underestimating dramatically the amount of assets that are going to be tokenized in the future. And I'll tell you why. And the presentation before was actually about tokenizing cash, right? Stablecoin, if you think about it, is actually tokenizing cash. And that market is already at $2 trillion today, if you look at all the stablecoins in the world. And I'm not going to go through the different topics, but every single asset classes in the world will be at some point tokenized. Some of them are going to be more than others, and I'll go through that in a little bit, right? But this is a huge market. This is a huge market to capture and to build on. So what is tokenization? I'm sure if you ask around to your neighbors in the room, they're going to give you a different answer to that question. Everybody has a different definition. How many of you have tokens already? Raise your hand if you think you have tokens already. No one? I'm going to tell you, here one. I'm going to tell you, you all have tokens already, right? And you should have known that from the presentation before. If you have a coin or a bill in your pocket, if you have cash, that's a token. It happens to be a physical token, but you do have a token representing some value, right? So that's what you need to think about. Now we are going to digitize those tokens, so they're going to become digital. Of course, it's much easier to transact with a digital token, especially if you're not in the same room. You need to transfer value between different parties. So it is already here. Tokenization is not new. You know tokenization already. But what we are doing here is we are taking large, illiquid assets, and we are tokenizing those assets so they become liquid and they become accessible to many people. I'm going to give you an example that is very typical in the tokenization world. I own, not me, but that's the example, I own a bunch of buildings in New York, and I need to create some liquidity out of those buildings. Outside of getting the rents being paid all the time, I need to extract liquid cash from those assets because I need to start new projects or I need to invest into something else. Today, it's really hard to do this because my only way to do that is to create complex financial instruments or to actually sell the building to get the cash and buy something else. With tokenization of that set of buildings, what I can do is I can create a $100 value representing a $100 value of that building or buildings. And that is a token representing the value, a small fractional value of those buildings. And by doing that, I can now say, you investors, you can invest and you can buy those tokens and you become a fractional owner of a building in New York. All right? How many of us own buildings in New York? No one is going to raise their hand. How many of us are owners of a private equity fund or private debt? None of us are going to say we own this because no one has access to those asset classes today. With tokenization, you will. With tokenization, you do today in some cases. And that is a real revolution, right? More than half of the assets in the world are illiquid. More than half of the assets in the world are illiquid. And they're going to become liquid with tokenization. That's a massive change. That's a massive disruption that we're going to see in the next few years. And of course, it does apply to buildings, and it applies to cash with stablecoin, many instances. But you can apply that to very different type of asset classes. Intellectual property, right? So if you're a large organization like a Google or an Apple, you have a lot of IP, and if you want to monetize this IP for some reason, you can tokenize it, and you can sell a portion of this IP, and when you get royalties for people using your IP, the investors are going to be paid a portion, a fraction of that revenue. So you can tokenize pretty much everything that has value. The point is, you can tokenize pretty much anything. So why do we tokenize? I talked about this a little bit, but few points that you need to remember. The number one is, we create liquidity, right? So now we create liquidity in the market that was illiquid before. I talked about this already. We do that with the ability to trade 24/7. That's new, because if you go to the stock market or pretty much any market in the world today, you cannot trade 24/7. You have to wait for the market to open, and you can place your orders outside of the market, but it is not a 24/7 market. With tokenization, it is and will be a 24/7 market. That's really hard for many people to accept that we're going to be in a 24/7 market, because it means in some cases you have to support 24/7 trading. But that's going to be a big change, right? So time zones don't care anymore. Geographical location doesn't matter anymore, right? So a lot of very important changes are going to happen because we are tokenizing those assets and we're offering 24/7. And then transparency is another one. We are building those tokenization platform on blockchain platforms, DLT, decentralized ledger technologies. And because we do that, the transparency associated with this increases, and the different parties involved with trading those assets are going to have access to those activities in real time, right? So I know that someone in the room traded a token with someone else in the room because I can see that on a blockchain platform. A lot of issues with this, but a lot of transparency associated with this too. Very, very important. And then the extension of tokenization is we're going to remove a lot of the middlemen. We're going to be more efficient because you trade 24/7, because you settle transactions in real time, which is not the case today by far, especially for illiquid assets. All right? So really important. That's why we do tokenization. We liquefy assets, especially the ones which are illiquid today. We give access to people who don't have access to those assets today. My example of the building is important, right? So New York, now you're in India and you want to invest in real estate in New York. Today it's really hard to do this because you don't have the mechanisms to do that. Tomorrow, with tokenization, you can buy tokens representing those asset classes, and suddenly you have a diversified portfolio because you have access to real estate in New York. And the time is right. You know, over the last 15 years, many of us have worked on tokenization platforms. So maybe you heard that before from other players here in Singapore, but the technology is ready. So don't use the technology as an excuse to not start building, because all that is ready to go, because we've been at this topic for quite a while. The demand for liquidity is increasing, right? I talked about half of the asset classes in the world, more than half are illiquid. They're going to become liquid. They're going to create more fluidity into the capital markets. That demand is really high today for a lot of different reasons, mostly macro. And then the regulatory agenda are changing, which is also a very big deal. And Singapore is one of the leaders, by the way, right, in leading the way in tokenization, creating very specific frameworks to let organizations build tokenization platform. Project Guardian, if you heard about Project Guardian in Singapore, that's an enablement of those things. But that happened in Europe with Mika, that happens in Dubai with Vara, that happens in many, many places in the world, and probably an acceleration in the US after what happened the last few days. So we're going to see a regulatory framework changing and enabling those platforms to go. The challenges are still there, right? So regulatory is still going to be a challenge because regulators don't move fast, right? I don't know how many of you are regulators in the room, but typically a regulatory environment doesn't move as fast as the technology, so we're still going to have to wait. The good news is, as I mentioned, Singapore, Dubai, Qatar, Europe, FCA in London, many regulators are already engaged. So that's the good news around the regulatory framework. The second one is, when you think about tokenization, many of us think cryptocurrencies and blockchain and many issues around accounting and taxes and do I have the right as an organization to touch a cryptocurrency, right? The good news here is that many of the platforms, including our platform, is abstracting that complexity, right? So we're not saying it disappears or you go around it. We actually are creating an environment, a platform where all those things are not visible to you. You don't need to think about that anymore. You need to focus on building your use case and your application on the top of it. So that's the good news. Forget about crypto, forget about blockchain, think about tokenizing your assets, all right? The third one is a very interesting one, and I had many discussions this week on this topic. This is the ability for the incumbents to push back on any kind of innovation, but many of them, and I talked to HSBC, I talked to SBI, I talked to DBS yesterday, many of those banks are actually working on tokenization because they see the value today, which means that some of them are going to push, but many others are going to be very engaged on this topic. So if you want to build a tokenization platform today with some of them, find them and go after them. They are listening, they are ready to engage, which is really good news. And then the last point is, we've seen that in the one presentation before me, but stablecoin are the killer app. Finally, in the blockchain world, an application, which is a stablecoin, has been able to demonstrate the value of the technology, right? So the technology has real value with real use cases in the real world, and that's also something that is good news for us. So there is no reason to wait anymore, and I'll give you a few things. First, work on your business case. Tokenization is not a solution looking for a problem. It is not that anymore. It's real, it's here, it's changing the way we engage with assets. Number two, do not put, if you're an asset manager, do not put bad assets onto your tokenization platform. Because I've seen that, I have examples of that in the real estate world where people are saying, oh, I have this crappy building here, no one wants to invest in it. I'm going to put that on a tokenization platform with blockchain, and dumb investors are going to buy tokens representing that asset. I've seen that. I did invest in some of that just to see how it works. I lost money because that's not the right way to do it, right? So that's a very important piece. Of course, you have to understand the market, and finally, come and start building with us. So Hedera is a blockchain platform, and we are operated by large organizations, including LG and Google and IBM and Dell and 32 organizations over the world who are building with us, right? So we are, in the blockchain world, the adults in the room. So come build with us. We have a tremendous amount of assets to work with you if you want to build something, or if you want to expose your assets, or if you want to build an application where your consumers, your investors, will have access to not only stocks and bonds, but real estate, private equity, and so on. And I want to see that application when I come here next year at Singapore FinTech Festival. So some of you will have to build this application with us. So come with us. Thank you for your time.